for most of us, it was just a very distant, formal relationship. We would, many of my godbrothers never saw Srila Prabhupada. I was fortunate to get to see him about 30 or 40 times, giving classes and on morning walks. And on one occasion, I was introduced to him by my supervisor, Satsrup Maharaj, and then I got to cook lunch for Prabhupada one time and serve him. And he was later asking, why are so many people hanging around cooking for me? So it was not that being a disciple of Prabhupada meant a lot of intimate association, but it was a very faith-building experience, because when he was around, or even just knowing he was present on earth, feel like, okay, there's no problem that can't be solved. There's no issue that can't be resolved, no question that can't be answered. So that was a wonderful feeling, a feeling of shelter and security that we all reveled in and felt like would go on forever and could not imagine living without. And also there was a great deal of confidence. In 1975 there was an initiation in Chicago, and 75 devotees were initiated, and 5 sets of deities were installed that would be on traveling buses going all over the country. And I was 20 years old, and my fellows and I were thinking, okay, Krishna consciousness is going to take over America 5 years maximum. Because it was just so much better than anything else out there. So, the hard reality is that it's difficult to spread Krishna consciousness because most people are interested in material life only. And being a devotee, just being a devotee, means swimming upstream in a materialistic society. So Prabhupada gave us a lot of confidence for that. He gave us a lot of enthusiasm, and he showed us what we could do, what a difference one person could make. Now, one thing that's very interesting to me, how many of you are familiar with Srila Prabhupada? You read something about him? Is there anyone here who doesn't know much about Prabhupada? Okay, so I just don't want to talk about somebody you don't know, or you don't know who I'm talking about. That's all right. So in those days, Srila Prabhupada's books were only partially in print. We had the Bhagavad Gita and a few volumes of the Srimad Bhagavatam. The Chaitanya Charitamrita came out in 1975. The Bhagavatam was through the 6th canto or so, 8th, 7th canto perhaps. And we had just a few tapes. There was no internet. We lived without internet. We lived in caves. And very few tapes, very few videos or films. So, and no biography and no memoirs. So there's such a wealth of literature about Srila Prabhupada now that it's actually possible to know him much better now than it was then, if you're interested. And we have the Veda base, we have all the Vani, all the words, all the letters, all the lectures. As I understand it, Prabhupada is one of the best documented figures in religious history. And certainly 500 million of his books have been distributed all over the world in 100 different languages. I mean, he's a very profound person, but he was very humble and very slight in stature, about 5'4" and maybe weighed 100 pounds. But he had this enormous presence. And it was, again, wonderful just to see him and be with him. Everyone would feel very happy. So that's what I wanted to share with you, a little of the experience of seeing Prabhupada and also Prabhupada's relevance today. The great thing about Prabhupada is there are so many words that he has written and spoken that are accessible to us now. The great difficulty with Prabhupada is that there are so many words that he has written and spoken that are accessible to us now. Because if one thing, he says one thing over here and one thing over there, then wait a minute, there's contradictions. And taking things out of context, it's very easy to find such contradictions. And so if we're examining to see if this is a person in whom we can place our faith and there's some contradiction, then it's very easy to say, for the mind to say, okay, this is the reason why instead of everything else, I can't trust this person. See? But what I want to share with you is how I've come to understand Prabhupada's instructions as being like a drugstore. And he was, after all, in the pharmacy business. So in the drugstore, there's all kinds of medications. If you walk into the drugstore with some ailment and just start reaching, I'll try this one, that one looks good, you know, then the chances of you getting the right prescription the right medication are slim. But if you have a prescription, then you can go and give it to the pharmacist and get exactly the right medication for your particular condition, right? So there are over-the-counter drugs at the drugstore, vitamin C, aspirin, Tylenol, anyone can go and buy. So that's like the holy name, that's the Bhagavad Gita, the Bhagavatam. Anyone can have access to these things, prasadam, these are OTC. But the finer points can require a prescription. And if we go taking drugs for which we have no particular need, then that can cause us some unwanted side effects. So it's important to be able to take Prabhupada's instructions in context, and when we find something that we don't understand or is contradictory, then we should not lose faith in what he's saying, but inquire. Try to understand it from more experienced students in his teachings. According to our particular circumstance, the prescription can be very different. There was an incident where one disciple was managing, he was a sannyasi, and he was managing the temple in Vrindavan. He was kind of a scholarly type of person, not really a great manager, but he was the president. And then another sannyasi came, he was a newly minted sannyasi, very enthusiastic, and he went in the temple and was leading fired up kirtans, and all the devotees got very excited, and some of them said, why shouldn't he be the temple president? So Prabhupada didn't like his politics. So he called the new sannyasi and he called the temple president sannyasi into his office. And he started speaking to the new sannyasi. This is in front of several people. He said, why are you staying here in Vrindavan? Sannyas means traveling. You should be traveling and preaching. You don't stay in one place. You go everywhere and spread Krishna consciousness. Go. And then he turned to the other sannyasi and said, and you stay here and manage Vrindavan. So each individual case requires a particular prescription. And this is why we need to apply Prabhupada's teachings with some tact and some decorum, and not just take everything, or be sure to resolve conflicts that we see. Okay, some people tend towards a very conservative approach, and that's there in Prabhupada's books. Very strict on the rules and regulations. Everything just has to be so, and there's Prabhupada said, and there's no deviation, and that's it. Okay? This is we would call a conservative interpretation. And then there's a very liberal interpretation where we say, okay, just add Krishna to your life and just relax and be yourself and add Krishna. And, you know, you're chanting one round, very good. You're chanting 2 rounds, very good. You know, just encouraging. So both are legitimate approaches. So we have to see what works for our particular patient, if we're good physicians, right? One of my godbrothers became a disciple at the same time with another young man. They both joined the temple. They both got initiated at the same time. And one of them was a heroin addict, and the other one was a professionally trained architect. So they would get letters from Srila Prabhupada, and to the heroin addict he was writing, you're a very good boy, keep chanting this mantra, you're doing very nicely. And to the architect he'd write, you are a nonsense, why have you done this? So, according to the nature of the individual, we need to apply Prabhupada's teachings. Any questions or comments about that? Yes, Prabhu.
So sometimes I feel, did Prabhupada want all his conversations to be published and everything? That was he aware that everything wanted to be published?
He knew it was all being taped. He was very absorbed in just the spreading Krishna consciousness, and he would let his disciples record, but his focus was more on the people in front of him at all times.
But he may have said some things that he didn't want it to be in print or anything like that.
I don't know of any case where he ever censored anything that he said. Like Nixon don't play those tapes. So, but that was, Prabhupada was just very fixed in what he was doing. And the side of his disciples. So very strong statements about certain subjects in certain circumstances. But then he would behave very liberally on the same subject in other occasions. So this is why it's so important to understand time, place, and circumstance. It doesn't change the absolute quality. It just shows how Krishna is very accommodating. He's very broad. There's not this narrow little tiny path to come to Krishna. If we love Krishna, that is the way to reach him, and that will manifest in different people in entirely different ways. It's so amazing how Krishna has a unique relationship with each and every living entity. It's unfathomable, right? Go ahead.
So it seems that in the case of the books, they're meant for all people, clearly. In the case of the letters, they're directed at a particular person, and there may be other things about that person that we don't know, so we don't actually have the whole context of that person.
That's right.
And in the case of a conversation, there may be things going around outside, and there may be, we don't even know who's in the room necessarily. So it seems like there's even less context.
Yeah.
Would you say that that's fair to say?
Yes, that is exactly right. And according to who was present, Prabhupada would be speaking in a particular way. Can I bring up a very questionable topic? So the fourth regulative principle, this is an example. What does Prabhupada mean? No illicit sex life. Well, in some cases he said this means only for procreation. In other cases he said only within marriage. See, about 50% of the time each way. See, so we could say very hard line this way or a very soft line that way, but each individual has their own situation. So if we try to impose one set of practices on everybody, this is going to just narrow our impact in his service. So this is, yes, Prabhu.
Yes, Prabhu, that's very, very wonderful point about it. The movement started initially either two extremes, too liberal, too conservative. So now, as the movement is almost 50 plus years, things are, and those who are 20s, early 30s, that's what people started the movement. Now they're grown up 40, 50, 60 years later, and some still maintain some, and some blended both of them, and they found a common ground and move forward. There's so many things are there. So books, at the end of the day, books are the basis, not the letters. The letters is specifically for certain situations, certain ways. Because my question, having said that now, and some people are now third generations. The kids from that generation, or the people like us who are connected, came from different countries to this country and then connected. So there's so many varieties, variations, and then everybody can concoct anything or can take out of context. Prabhupada said this, Prabhupada said this. It's naturally right. Actually, they can go, but the context is missing. So now if you consider this, fast forward 50 years. What's going to happen? It's going to be another Christian religion, because that's what happened. There's so many branches happen. So the conservativeness has to be there, liberal has to be there. But how do you balance? But who? There is no. For one point, there's one person to go. Some conflicts happen. Prabhupada, what do you mean? So he correct right away. But you don't have one.
Yes.
You have many. And
Yes.
many came. So where do we go? Because at one point, you come to crossroads. You don't know where to left or right. You have all the things ready, but you can take out of context.
Right. Well, the guideline, one guideline is utility as a principle, palena parachiyate, you judge things by the results. So what works? And what may work in one situation may not work in another situation. Vaishnava means you should be able to adjust to any situation, act in any varna as necessary. Just know when to be liberal. A devotee is described as hard as a thunderbolt, soft as a rose. So sometimes there needs to be a hard line drawn. Other times there needs to be compassion and forgiveness. And when to apply them takes experience. How do you tell what's right? What is working? That's the bottom line. Now there's a history here. Could I give you a little history of ISKCON in this context? So the Prabhupada was initially very liberal with his disciples. Many of the first disciples who were initiated just dropped by for the evening and said, "Oh, there's initiation? All right, I'll sit in." And he accepted them, and he right? And then the next day they asked, "Are there any regulations now that we're disciples?" And he said, "I'm very glad you asked that question." So in time, he started raising the standard. People would have to have been chanting 16 rounds for a year and following the regular principles like that. So you remember that Prabhupada, for about 20 years, 15 or 20 years, was in India trying to start a society of Vaishnavas. And he had one casual follower after all those years. And he was very determined. He never gave up. But he was not getting much response in India. Then he was at 70, was able to go west, and after a year with very little impact, found interested people and started the movement. So after 3 years or so in America, in Canada mostly, and a little in Europe, then he brought some of his disciples to India. And when the Indian people saw the Western disciples, then they got interested. And then the movement became very popular in India. Before Prabhupada left this world, he had just a handful of disciples of Indian descent. Just a handful, very small number. Most of them were American, European, and Australian. But subsequently, the movement has grown much bigger in India than it has grown anywhere else in the world. And when those first disciples came back to the West, after being in India, they started introducing, oh, well, in India it's done this way and this way. So some of these more standards started coming at that time. And my wife and I lived through these things, these experiences. And it changed the character of the movement a lot. It became more strict. It became more like boot camp, and more army-like, militaristic almost. And then Prabhupada left this world at that time, around 1977. So, in summary, after his departure, that military-like precision, it didn't work. And it started to just deteriorate so that people in the West got less and less interested. Meanwhile, India is booming. And so that's where we kind of are at this point. And our success in Gainesville at attracting Western people has been to turn back the clock and make it more like it was in 1966, 67. Just accepting people, right, Shrestha? You experienced that? We even took Shrestha in. I mean, it's so that has worked. That's the point. So palena parachiyate, what works? Is it a compromise with the purity? I mean, to me, the 4 principles in japa, that's the minimum standard for everybody. You do those parameters, there's a lot of latitude to be yourself and express your devotion and your nature in various ways.
It's a very beautiful point. That's what is missing sometimes. People use it as a weapon. I was one of the victim as well as a propounder before.
Mm-mm.
But over the period of time, things change. We use the philosophy as a weapon.
Mm.
Try to
Yes.
what happens. Operation successful, patient is dead.
Yeah. Yes. So if our purpose is pleasing Prabhupada, then we should just evaluate how we're doing based on how people are receiving our message. Isn't it? Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Okay, I hope that. Yes, Rudy.
So you're saying that what works is the right thing, but what do you want to make it work like? What is the intention?
Yes.
Is this just 4 things and chanting and that's full stop and now you do whatever you want?
Well, people's devotion has to grow naturally. And the 4 principles in japa are the guidelines by which one can have a healthy devotional garden. That's like, that puts the practice of bhakti on a safe path. If we want to practice bhakti but we don't want to follow the principles, then this is a cheap kind of devotion that doesn't really filter to the deepest part of ourselves. It's superficial. Sahajya. And things are very cheap. Oh yes, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Haribo. And people do that. So both in America and India. So the principles are the minimum. And what we have experienced in Krishna House is that people grow very nicely in their own way. Some people like to wear shorts to Mangalarti, but they come. Some people like to wear dhotis and iron kurtas, and we just let people just wear what you like, as long as it's reasonably chaste and comfortable. It doesn't have a big Mickey Mouse on the shirt or whatever, to distract people. But people can be themselves in that atmosphere, which is how it was in the very early days. There is just acceptance. We're just very happy to see you here and chanting Hare Krishna. That's all. Add Krishna. You don't have to jump through a bunch of cultural hoops to be a devotee. You just have to add Krishna and take it from there. And people grow in their own way. You never know what they're going to come out to be. Prabhu.
So Mayapur tends to be like that, to ask people to just add Krishna. However, I believe that there's some people who, the reason that they joined is that they like that there's a lot of rules. Like, they're looking for something with a lot of rules.
Yes.
So, I guess maybe that approach works for certain people.
Yes.
And it's not just Indian people. I know of Western people.
Absolutely.
They just love rules.
Yeah. Because they want structure in their life. As long as those people understand that they don't have to impose their structure on others. See? And feel themselves superior because they are following a stricter standard. You see?
But sometimes people can feel, because I was impressed by this, somebody else also, if we tell them about the rules, they may also be impressed.
They may also be impressed is the word.
Impressed.
Yeah, Prabhupada said, be impressive, not repressive.
So in that spirit, they may be also telling that about the rules to others.
If they ask. See, there's a real tendency to evaluate. It's called the PDS. You've heard of that? The pure devotee syndrome. Oh, it's easy. What's your problem? So yes, the point is just to express our devotion in our own way and remember that real advancement in Krishna consciousness. How does the Uttama Adhikari see others?
As parts of Krishna.
But everyone else is more advanced than I, right? This is the goal, of advancement. So if we're looking at people and say, "Oh, you're not as strict as I am," that's not quite the Uttama platform. You remember the story of Duryodhana and Yudhisthira?
Better person.
Yes, Drona, their guru, tested them. He said, "Okay, Duryodhana, you go out and find somebody who is superior to you and bring that person back to me." And to Yudhisthira, he said, "You go out and find somebody who's inferior to you and bring that person back to me." So they both went out, and then Duryodhana came back and said, "I looked all day, I couldn't find anybody superior to me." And Yudhisthira came back and he said, "I saw one Shudra was beating a cow." And I thought, okay, this is something I would never do. This person is inferior. But then I followed him home, and it was a Kadashi. And I looked in the window, and his wife was feeding him a Kadashi prasad. He was observing a Kadashi. I said, no, he's my superior. So I couldn't find anybody. So they both came back empty-handed, and Drona said, Yudhisthira, you are fit to rule the world. Duryodhana, you are fit to be eaten by jackals. So remember, the Nectar of Instruction describes trying to find a devotee mentor who is free from the propensity of criticizing others. So if somebody has the nature to be very strict, that's fine for them. So long as they understand that to progress in bhakti, they're going to need to have respect for others, even if they're not necessarily as strict. It's good for them. It works for them. That's fine. But
Strict with oneself and lenient with others.
there it is. That was Prabhupada's instruction. Yes.
And also he exhibited that time to time.
He exhibited that time to time. Yes, with the heroin addict and the architect. Yeah.
Even if he was sharing the refrigerator with that initially, where the beef is there.
Yes.
But he never corrected.
Think nothing of it. When the first place where Prabhupada was staying in Butler, Pennsylvania, people would come to meet him in the evening and they'd be smoking while he was talking. Is it all right if we smoke? He said, oh yeah, think nothing of it. So,
But at the same time, he's so strict. At the same time, those are strict, he encourages them. Those who are accommodating, he encourages them. So like in the personality is so dynamic. Personality,
yeah,
it's not like black and white and this and that.
yes.
Every situation is different.
It's personal.
Yeah.
What is good for this person?
So that is the maturity. How
This,
they get
this is the pharmacist. This is the physician, right? I'll give a prescription for this person and a different prescription for this person. You know, you heard the story of the veterinarian? Did I tell you that? The veterinarian had an apprentice. So he would go and take care of large animals. And on one occasion he was called by a horse owner. My horse has got a huge growth and it's sick. And the horse was lying on his side. The veterinarian examined him and he said to his assistant, get me a hammer. So he brought him a hammer. He took and struck the horse on the throat and told the owner, okay, he'll be fine tomorrow. And the assistant said, well, that was easy. Anyone could do that. So he quit his role as the apprentice and started his own practice as a veterinarian. And he would go out with a hammer, and pretty soon the senior vet was getting calls. Who is this person you've trained? He's just hitting our animals with a hammer. So the veterinarian called his apprentice. What are you doing, you fool? Well, I saw you hit the horse. That horse had swallowed a watermelon. So if we don't understand actually how to apply the science, you see, then we'll be like that apprentice. And you know that when your only tool is a hammer, the whole world is a nail. Get this. The situation is calling for delicate surgery. You're so all right. Yes.
I was thinking that even though Prabhupada was very heavy with some people, but they still remember it as a blessing or as a benevolence of Prabhupada because of his purity and his well-wishing attitude for that person.
Yes.
So even though he was very heavy and chastising, but I've seen so many memories where they remember that as the best part of their life.
Yes. Yes. And Prabhupada could call people rascals and fools, and that's because he genuinely loved them, and he wasn't rejecting them. He was just trying to improve them. All right, so many things. So I'd like to read a piece of this book, if I may, because it's generally easier to read something I've already written than try to think of something new. So if you wouldn't mind just sharing these, everyone could, it's probably enough to share with one for every 2 people or 1.5 persons. Okay. This is a book I wrote, just a tribute to Srila Prabhupada, that is a compilation of annual offerings. On the spiritual master's birthday, the disciple is supposed to write some offering in his honor. And so I took offerings from the last 20 years or so, and there are 30 years, picked out my favorites, and then wrote about them a little bit. So also in here is some of Srila Prabhupada's poetry, including his Puja offering that inspired me to try poetry in the first place. That's on page 14. Why don't we just read that to start, huh? He wrote this in praise of his spiritual master in 1936. And it's interesting that this poem was lost. And when Srila Prabhupada's disciples were clearing out his room in Vrindavan, they found it. He had told them, just throw away all the papers. But they went through that and they found this poem and brought it to him. He was, oh, yes, I remember that.
This was written by Prabhupada?
This is Prabhupada's Vyas Puja offering for Srila Bhaktisiddhanta. Why don't we read this aloud together, shall we? Adore, adore ye all the happy day, more blessed than heaven, sweeter than May, when he appeared at Puri, the holy place, my Lord and Master, his divine grace. O my Master, the evangelic angel, give us thy light, light up thy candle. Struggle for existence, a human race, the only hope is divine grace. Misled we are, all going astray, save us, Lord, our fervent pray. Wonder thy ways to turn your face, adore thy feet, your divine grace. Forgotten Krishna, we fallen souls, pay most heavy the illusion's toll. Darkness around, all untraced. The only hope is divine grace. Message of service thou hast brought. A healthful life is Chaitanya wrought. Unknown to all, it's full of brace. That's your gift, your divine grace. Absolute is sentient, thou hast proved. Impersonal calamity. This gives us a life, anew and fresh. Worship thy feet, your divine grace. Had you not come, who had told the message of Krishna, forceful and bold? That's your right, you have the mace. Save me, a fallen, your divine grace. The line of service is drawn by you, is pleasing and healthy like morning dew. The oldest of all, but in new dress, miracle done, your divine grace. So this is an Astika, 8 verses. And any of those verses stand out for you? The one that his guru liked very much was the 6th one. Yeah, he would read that to guests. Absolute is sentient. God is a person, in other words. Thou hast proved. Impersonal calamity, to think of God as one, thou hast removed. So poetry is, one art form. It's good for a devotee to have a hobby of some kind. We all need a hobby. My godbrother Kalakantha Prabhu did all the artwork. That's his hobby. Throughout the book, he drew all these pictures, including this on the back and all throughout. He's a busy administrator and by nature kind of a Kshatriya type, but he likes to do this. So I also like to write poetry and found so much inspiration in that poem, how Prabhupada presented things so concisely, and said so much in so few words. Today, poetry is often written in free verse. Do you know what that means? It means no rhymes, no meter,
Yeah.
right? It's like playing tennis without a net. So to try to put ideas in meter and rhyme is, anyway, for me it's a hobby I enjoy. So this poem inspired me to try it about 30 years ago. And let's turn to page 68. I like to read, and maybe we could discuss one of my poems. Right? 68, yeah. This is a poem called Prabhupada's Son. When you confront Arjuna's situation, unsure if you should fight or just pretend, and thinking of Lord Krishna's affirmations, go ahead, yeah, we'll read. Sorry, we can read together, sure. Toss out the slightest thought of giving in. If you can do your duty when it pains you, without a hope of hearing, job well done. If you accept the fact that some outgain you, without a jealous thought to anyone. If in this ugly, brutal world you're able to offer something lovely to the Lord, while keeping bread upon your family's table, and making service done its own reward. If you meet all your worldly obligations, and reap the crop you broke your back to plant, aspiring for the highest destination, and tolerating those who say you can't. If you can take the blows inflicted on you, as minimized reactions to your sin, and turn your pain to strength for serving Guru, determined not to leave the Lord again. If you no longer crave the worldly tempest on radio, online, or on TV, and pick up Srimad Bhagavatam with interest, and feel yourself quite fortunate and free. If you can keep a gentleman's demeanor when every circumstance conspires to rile, and thinking of the Lord within, remember that every spirit soul deserves a smile. If you no longer think of sex as pleasure, as everybody does when they are young, and find yourself contented with the treasure of Krishna's holy names upon your tongue. If you can chant your rounds when some around you are setting down their beads and blaming you. If you can keep your vows when Maya hounds you, ignoring her advice to chew the chewed. If you encounter faults among devotees, some weaknesses in those you thought were strong, and sit with them to share some dal and rotis, and realize not all they do is wrong. If your own faults and follies overcome you, obscuring those in others you may see, if true appreciation flows out from you each time you greet another devotee, if you can be straightforward in your dealings and shed the taste for gossiping and lies, while working in a way that fosters healing without thinking yourself too good or wise, if you trust those of greater realization to guide your own devotion to the Lord, Make friends with those who share your situation and kindly help the novices move forward. If you can set aside your own conceptions and take Gauranga's orders on your head to help one soul forsake this world's deceptions and take to Krishna consciousness instead. If you chant Hare Krishna loud and often... That's all
I
right.
wanted to read that day, but the episode also did not come.
Ah.
Something else was going on.
Ah.
But some of the things was there,
Hmm.
what you read. So
Hmm.
he expressed,
Hmm.
like another point. For example, I just want to say something. You're so great, you gave me so many gifts. 2 hands I cannot hold.
Hmm.
Like, it's a simple word,
Mhm.
but you know what I mean? Like that I could see so many of things,
Uh-huh.
which I can relate very simple word. So there's another word, other thing I can think of, which related to me. I can't think of it.
That's all right.
But you got the point, like
Yes.
you're expressing yourself. Like,
Yes, and we write for self-purification. That's got to be the motivation, just to help ourselves become better devotees, or more clear and focused on our service. But then publishing is for... I publish because I either want to help people get introduced to Prabhupada's books, or people who are familiar with Prabhupada's books to have refresher from different points of view. That's all. So it's not to replace, but supplement Prabhupada's books for publishing. Anyway, this is it's not, there's so many ways to express our devotion for Krishna: the poetry, or journalism, or art, or gardening, or music, or you name it. So many ways. Cooking. So each individual has their own particular way. The point is to do something that you love to do. We may have to work to maintain our lives in this world, but there should be something that we enjoy doing for Krishna so much that it becomes our particular service, unique service for the Lord. All right. Okay, other thoughts or reflections on this? Yes.
I was going to say the verses, if you can take the blows inflicted on you as minimized reactions to a sin, and turn your pain to strength discerning good, determine not to do the wrong. I
Yes.
think the first 4-6 verses is relevant to those who are very much in the material world and sincerely want to be devotees.
Yes. Yes. We all have to deal with material situations that are so difficult and incompatible with our devotional aspirations. And one strategy is just try to remove ourselves from the situation, but that's rejected in Bhagavad Gita. So yes, taking blows inflicted on us as minimized reactions for our sins. Can anyone remember the verse Prabhupada said should be the motto for all devotees that this is taken from? Tenukampam susamikshimano bunjana evatma kritam vipakam tadvat papurvir viditam namaste jiveta se mukti pade sadaya bhak. This means that if one can accept sufferings as the consequences of one's own past karma, without blaming others, but taking full responsibility, and if one, in spite of the suffering, goes on performing one's devotional service and worshiping Krishna within the core of one's heart, never blaming Krishna for the suffering, that person becomes the rightful heir to the kingdom of God. And to be, if you're an heir or heiress, what do you have to do to collect your inheritance?
Stay alive.
Just stay alive. You just have to make it somehow or other. So this verse gives the guidelines how to make it through this life. If I'm suffering in some way, it's not because of what this person's doing to me or that person has done to me. It's because of things I have done in the past, and I accept responsibility now for my own suffering. That's not easy to do, but it is the only way to address suffering in a way that will allow us to live without being bitter. It enables us to forgive others. And forgiving is important because what happens if somebody wrongs you and you don't forgive them? What happens when you die?
You may have to take a birth again just to take revenge.
You have to hang around with that person again, exactly. So forgiving is not for the other person's benefit, it's for our benefit. and being able to forgive, to be able to live without bitterness, without grudges, without hatred. So, okay, thank you for that. I'm glad you pointed that. I imagine you get a lot of that in your situation, right? All right, any other reflections on this? Yes, Rumi?
I really liked this verse. I hope I'll remember it. If you encounter faults among devotees, some weaknesses in those you thought were strong, and sit with them to share some dal and rotis, and realize not all they do is wrong. So I'll have to try that the next time. Dal and rotis. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. There's a Christian saying, both read Bible day and night. I read black and you read white. That's very painful, isn't it? If we get in conflicts with devotees, there's nothing more. It's not like the politics of the office. The politics of the temple they can really undermine our enthusiasm.
That's
So,
like a devotee is a honeybee. So
yes.
he sees only the good, he doesn't take the bad.
This sees the good. How about if you hear somebody criticizing another devotee? I'm sure that never happens in Columbus, but it does happen in other temples sometimes. But if it were to happen, how would you respond? You hear somebody comes up to you and says, I'm not supposed to tell anybody this, but, or don't tell this to anybody else, but this is confidential, but you got a short? Okay, so how would you respond? Any suggestions, Hari?
A devotee told me, I think it was in a home program, is that if somebody comes and tells me that somebody's doing bad, that they're doing like if I'm complaining that he's doing bad, he's doing nonsense, and then I would just say, oh, but that devotee has some so nice things to say about you.
Yes. That's a real good one. Jiu-jitsu. Somebody comes to you and say, Rahul is such a nonsense. You say, that's funny. Rahul says so many nice things about you. You can also counter it by saying, oh, really? I think Rahul's such a nice person. He does so much. He writes plays. He does so much good service.
Yeah.
So say something positive to counteract that negative. That catches people off guard.
But it depends on what your role in the, let's say you are a temple president, for instance. And somebody comes and says, oh, this person comes in the temple and he does some service, but he also harasses some people and he misbehaves with them.
That's the difference, yes.
Then you cannot just say, okay, that's all right. You have to take some action also.
Yes, in some circumstances. But generally we're talking about petty issues. Yeah. Okay, very good. Any other particular thoughts? Okay, would you like to read another one? Okay. This, let's see. Let me pick one out here. Okay, page 20.
The other thing in this one is about how one should resist Maya's temptations. And he's fixed on that comes out from this. There'll be so many temptations in one's life.
Yes.
But to stick to the path of, to maintain integrity.
Yes.
Is has many verses like that.
Yeah, we should not be under the illusion that we're not going to have problems from our minds and desires. It's rather that we learn to live with them and tolerate them and not indulge them, either in fulfilling them or fighting them, just observing them. Yoga. That's, yes. So, okay, page 20. We'll read together. You could have stayed in Vrajadam, where chanting is most sweet, or moved to holy Navadvip in spiritual retreat. Your god brothers had temples there with room enough for you to sit and speak on holidays to a visitor or two. You could have said, it's Krishna's will, my visa was denied. I may have failed, but now I know at least that I have tried. Your patrons said you'd die abroad. Your god brothers just scoffed. You could have said, who'll meet the boat and guide me safely off? You could have had one look at us and asked, what have I done? Then caught the next boat back to home, unblamed by anyone. The Westerners, you could have said, can go to hell and stay. Who would have disagreed with you? We were well on our way. Instead, you laid your final years like flowers at Krishna's feet. Siddhanta's smile, your hidden guide, Thakur's vision in reach. Producing 80 volumes as you guided us along, you showed us how to cook prasad and teach Lord Krishna's song. And as we teach the boys and girls from every land on earth, come forth to serve you, Prabhupada, renewed in second birth. I could have been a PhD had I but stayed in school, piled up a couple million, built a fancy house and pool. I could have written novels, legislated laws and rules, or been a famous music star. I could have just been cool. Instead, I laid my youthful years like flowers at your feet. Malporas caused my interest, and samosas my defeat. My dad said, son, you're brainwashed. My friend said, you're a fool. My blunders as a Vaishnava were many, triumphs few. Reflecting on my bygone youth, as one my age is prone, I wouldn't trade your glance for gold, your words for precious stones. This morning on the Japa trail, the northern star shone down, so fixed and true it seemed like you with devas dancing round. Then dawn concealed that starry stage and lit a wintry scene of all I am and all you are and all that lies between. This is a biographical and appreciation also of Prabhupada. So any thoughts about this? Any discussion?
How preaching you to shed gallons of blood to make devotees.
This is what, yes, Prabhupada's sacrifice.
But he was very happy to do that. It's not like a feeling, you have to do this. So he voluntarily did it. That is a gulf of difference between that. Sometimes the devotees, we see that I have to do this as a duty. He said, but somebody does it willingly, even if it's painful, appears to be outside is painful, but they really enjoy it. They would like to go through again and again if it comes. That's where the Prabhupada never, like a Pandavas, other people think they are going through, but for them they are always happy. That's what Kunti
Yes,
said.
that's the point.
We never feel the pain. We felt that's also part of the life. So they enjoy as a mercy of the God. That makes the heart hard in the butter. Otherwise, sometimes what happens on the name of principles can be also that's good. But that particular piece is really, which no acharyas has given in the past, which Prabhupada gave to the humanity. Spirituality, the dimension which is not known to the people. Either they practice or they share. But the practice and share, what he did is something spectacular.
Well, this is one of the things about studying Prabhupada's life is that he had a family, he raised his children, he had financial anxieties and worked and was involved in intrigues and politics that cost him, and started his own business, and his business failed, and he went through, in other words, all of the things that other people, that all of us go through. He was a real person. And it sometimes looks so miraculous what Prabhupada did, but really he was just determined. He just stuck with it. And I agree with you, Naveen. He enjoyed it. He loved so much what he was doing. It wasn't an austerity, although from an external point of view, he's doing many austerities. So many austerities, but he was in ecstasy. And because he was reciprocating with his guru and with Krishna and feeling that reciprocation.
That was the point that really attracted me in Prabhupada, another aspect. He enjoyed, in the sense he's in bliss, whatever he does.
Whatever, yes.
What came up is austerity, I'm doing the sacrifice.
Yes.
He didn't come across. Other people can perceive that, but he didn't.
On a smaller scale, do you experience this with perhaps some friends at work or neighbors you might know that, how do you follow these regular principles? You grit your teeth, no hamburgers. They feel like it's, used to invite Rabindra Srila Prabhu to speak in his class at a college in Pennsylvania. And it was a Christian college. So on the way to the class, he always walked past the Hinduism display on the wall, and there was a bed of nails. And so when they'd walk by, the professor would kind of stop and say, there it is. In other words, we don't have to do all these austerities like you do, because not by works alone can one attain God, but by grace. See, so this is their
Protestant.
Yes. This is a misunderstanding of the philosophy. Regulative principles are the regulative principles of freedom. Yes, just to live without these entangling karmic activities sets us free, and life becomes very blissful. That's at the Krishna house in Gainesville. We experience this a lot. That the kids are out there serving the lunch, and they're just so happy. It's so much fun. They just because every scoop of halva, you say, "Oh, human birth, human birth," and they're having so much fun that the students are just bewildered. Like, is it drugs? What is it? People seem so happy, and you can experience that right from the beginning. And Prabhupada was certainly very happy. He was challenged once after a lecture, and a student raised his hand. Are you happy? So, how do you answer a difficult question?
By asking another question.
Yes, have I another question? So Prabhupada said, if I tell you, will you believe me? So what could the boy say? Yes. He says no, and he says bigot. So yes, yes. And Prabhupada said, yes. All right, other thoughts? Yes, Prabhu.
So I really like this verse that Srila Prabhupada made such a sacrifice to come all the way here and make disciples, and his disciples, reflecting on my bygone youth, as one my age is prone, I wouldn't trade your glance for gold and your words for precious stones. The disciples are also ready to sacrifice their youth to serve him and wouldn't trade for gold.
Yes, in our small way, in our small way. Prabhupada's sacrifice was so much. Can you imagine the courage it took to get on the boat? He'd never been out of India, 70 years old. No money, no sponsor, just going to this whole strange, if we have to go out to dinner in a restaurant with some people we don't know, we feel.
And there weren't that many people who had come here by that at that time. It's
Mm-hmm.
not like there were his so many friends who had already gone, and he could hear what it was like.
Yes, yeah, it was just the same time that immigration was open for
Yes.
Indians to come. Yeah,
Yeah, after the 1965 Act.
yes, it's amazing, isn't it? All right, yes, Prabhu.
Salvation by grace or by works.
Yes.
Of course, work is there, but devotee may feel that I'm not able to really follow to the highest level. And he does kind of, in his heart may plead for grace.
Mm-hmm.
How does that work in our situation? Most devotees are not going to become pure.
Why not?
That's generally the human experience.
Well, those basics that Prabhupada gave are so important for us to be in sustainable Krishna consciousness. Right? Remember, Brahma creates passion. Shiva destroys ignorance. But it takes Vishnu to maintain. So God himself has to come and maintain the material creation. So that maintaining is hard. That's the most challenging. So keeping the principles, keeping our chanting, these are things that help us sustain a happy, balanced spiritual life. And to be able to stay in Krishna consciousness a lifetime is our goal. Whatever we may accomplish is really insignificant in the greater scheme of things, isn't it? Do you remember that story, Prabhupada talking to Tamal Krishna Goswami? We were just talking with him in his room, and he said, Lord Vishnu lies down in the spiritual world, and from his body, countless universes emanate. And in each universe, there are billions of planets and stars. And in this universe, this is one insignificant universe. And in this one insignificant planet, there is one little portion of that planet which is called America. And in America, there are so many cities. And among them all, there's one insignificant city called Los Angeles. And in Los Angeles, there's so many neighborhoods full of houses and people. And in one of those neighborhoods, there's one little house with where Tamal Krishna Maharaj is sitting and he's thinking, I'm very important. So the point is, whatever we do for Krishna is very, it's insignificant, only by his grace. If Krishna wants something, it'll happen very easily. If he doesn't want it, no matter what we do, right, it will not happen. So keeping our purity and keeping our regulative principles, these things help us remain happy and peaceful in Krishna consciousness. And then, if Krishna wants, things happen very easily. We're not the doers. So, Prabhupada said we should aspire to make this our last lifetime. Finish up our business, get out. So that means really developing our relationship with Krishna. And chanting is the key for that. Associating nicely with devotees is the key for that. So that we are able to stay in the Sangha and get the strength from each other's association. Avoiding offenses, chanting, following the principles. These simple things are our ticket back to Godhead. So, anyway, I guess I have more confidence. Prabhupada said we'll have ISKCON in the spiritual sky. Everyone will be there. This devotee will be there, and that devotee will be there. Only Mr. Nair, he said, is giving him a hard time with his real estate. He will not be there. Yes, Prabhu.
I was thinking about in Chaitanya Charitamrita, the symptoms of spiritual advancements are mentioned. One of them, of course, these are spiritually very advanced people, but one is Asha Bandha. That somehow I'm not pure and I'm not fit for Krishna's mercy, but he is very kind. I'm hoping that he will give me his mercy somehow or the other.
I have no love for Krishna, nor do I have any attachment for the causes of developing love for Krishna. And in spite of that, yes, we should be optimistic and hopeful. So I'm going to get Krishna's mercy. Very nice point, thank you. All right, shall we read one more and then we'll wrap it up? Let's see. How about page 56? So just like when you're worshiping the Ganges, the only thing that's pure enough to offer the Ganges is what? Ganges water, yeah. So. Lessons from Srila Prabhupada. The spirit drives the body as a person drives the car. Our bodies sicken, age, and die, however great we are. Yet when we tire and expire, we're not finished yet. Another body's waiting, and God knows what kind we'll get. Take all the rest you need, but not at dawn or just before. Eat all you can digest, and if you're young, perhaps some more. Get married to a proper mate if you desire sex. Defend yourself when needed, but in general, pay respects. Lamenting over what is done will only squander fuel. To hanker for some paradise consumes the lives of fools. The present day is all we have to cultivate success, and if we give this day to Krishna, surely we'll progress. Be sure to listen carefully to someone more advanced, and show compassion to those souls of lesser circumstance. And when you're choosing friends, select some saintly devotees, for one becomes like one's companions, that is guaranteed. The Shastras are our basis and our power, purity. Utilities are principle, our essence, SKP. In transcendental sacrifice, all things are absolute. To nourish leaves and branches, pour the water on the root. Chant Hare Krishna daily and your life will be sublime. $1 million can't buy back a moment of lost time. A person far surpasses an impersonal supreme. Discussions of Lord Krishna are the most enchanting themes. To decorate the deity infuses one with bliss. A daily round of sadhana distills one's consciousness. To cook for Krishna's pleasure turns a drudgery to joy. For serving Krishna far surpasses merging in a void. A simple flower sweetly offered makes Lord Krishna pleased. Do not delay to douse a fire, debt, or some disease. And should Lord Krishna send the perfect guru, guide, and friend, the things you'll know and debt you'll owe shall never reach an end. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So any last comments? Reflection? Sankirtan party. Yeah. That was a tough one. It's a rhyme.
Preaching is the essence.
Preaching is the essence, right? All right.
Books are the basis.
Yes.
Did Prabhupada say that? Some people say he said that.
Yeah, it's questionable. I don't know. All right, so again, thank you for letting me share this with you tonight, and you're welcome to keep these books and my gifts if you'd like to take them. My pleasure. And again, I'd like to thank Gopi and Vasu. Vasu. Thank you for hosting. I'm sorry, Sumitra. Yes, okay, Sumitra and Gopi, excuse me. And thank you for inviting us all in your home, and thank you for Prem Sindhu Prabhu and Leela Manjari, thank you for inviting me, and Prem Vilas Prabhu, thank you for putting up with me and putting me up. So you have a wonderful yatra here, and I wish you all the best with the new temple. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.